What if I told you one of the greatest rock bands in history was repeatedly warned that their music would never succeed? Too long, too complicated, too strange. Record executives wanted shorter songs, radio wanted catchy singles, critics dismissed them as self-indulgent, but instead of changing, Rush did the exact opposite. That decision should have ended their career. Instead, it made them legends. In the mid-1970s, Rush was in trouble. Their 1975 album Caress of Steel sold poorly, and a supporting tour became jokingly known as the Down the Tubes Tour. Their record label wanted the band to abandon lengthy progressive rock songs and deliver something more commercial. It was the safest business decision imaginable. But Geddy Lee, Lifeson, and Neil Peart believed that compromising would cost them something even more important than album sales: their identity. Neil Peart later recalled that the word compromise was exactly what he couldn't accept. Rather than writing radio-friendly hits, the band doubled down on their vision. They poured everything into a bold, sidelong, 20-minute science fiction epic called 2012. It was a gamble that could have destroyed Rush forever, or completely rewrite their future. When Rush entered the studio to record 2012, they weren't simply making another album, they were risking everything. The message from their label was clear: write shorter songs, make the music more accessible, and give radio something it could easily play. Instead, Rush opened the album with a 20-minute, 7-part suite that occupied the entire first side of the record. It was the exact opposite of what the industry wanted. Written primarily by Neil Peart, 2012 tells the story of a future where creativity has been crushed by the authoritarian priests of the temples of Syrinx. One individual discovers an ancient guitar and learns that imagination can't be controlled forever. Peart acknowledged that the story was inspired in part by themes from Ayn Rand's novella Anthem, a fact he noted in the album's liner notes. Later he explained that he eventually developed different philosophical views, but the influence on 2112 was real. Against all expectations, the gamble paid off. Released in 1976, 2012 became Rush's commercial breakthrough. Critics who had dismissed the band began paying attention, fans embraced the ambitious storytelling, and the album eventually earned platinum certification in the United States. More importantly, Rush had proved something few bands ever do. You don't always have to follow the rules to build a loyal audience. But this was only the beginning. Most bands that survive one decade eventually reinvent themselves to fit the next. Rush chose a different path. By the early 1980s, rock music was changing fast. MTV was reshaping the industry, glam metal was exploding, and many progressive rock bands were fading away. Record labels wanted artists to look as good as they sounded, creating flashy music videos and carefully crafted public images. Rush wasn't interested. Geddy Lee, Lifeson, and Neil Peart rarely focused on celebrity. They avoided the tabloid lifestyle, gave relatively few interviews compared to many of their peers, and let the music speak for itself. Even when they embraced new technology, adding synthesizers on albums like Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, Signals, and Grace Under Pressure, they did it because they were creatively curious, not because a record executive demanded it. That decision frustrated some longtime fans, who preferred the heavier progressive sound of the 1970s. But Rush had never promised to stay the same. Their only rule was to keep evolving on their own terms. Ironically, that independence became one of their greatest strengths. While countless bands disappeared after chasing whatever was popular, Rush built a reputation for authenticity. Fans didn't know exactly what the next album would sound like, but they knew it would be honest. For many rock bands in the 1970s and 1980s, success came with a familiar image: wild parties, endless controversy, and larger-than-life egos. It was almost expected. Rush wanted none of it. Despite becoming one of the biggest touring acts in the world, Geddy Lee, Lifeson, and Neil Peart earned a reputation for professionalism and discipline. They were known for arriving prepared, taking rehearsals seriously, and putting the performance ahead of the spectacle. While they certainly enjoyed life on the road, they never built their identity around the excesses that defined many of their contemporaries. That approach extended to their business decisions as well. Rather than constantly chasing chart positions, Rush focused on making albums they believed in and delivering unforgettable live shows. It paid off. Over the years, they developed one of the most loyal fan bases in rock history, selling out arenas around the world without relying on scandals or manufactured publicity. Even critics who had once dismissed the band gradually changed their tune. In 2013, after years of fans campaigning for recognition, Rush was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. During their acceptance speech, the band remained humble, thanking the fans who had stood by them through every twist and turn. One of the most surprising rules Rush refused to follow wasn't written by record labels, it came from music critics. Throughout much of the 1970s and 1980s, the band received mixed, and sometimes openly hostile, reviews from major publications. Critics often labeled their music as overly technical, pretentious, or lacking emotion. For many bands, that kind of criticism would have triggered a dramatic change in style. Rush barely flinched. Neil Peart once observed that the band learned early not to depend on critical approval. Instead, they focused on the people filling concert halls night after night, and those fans kept showing up. Album after album, Rush built a dedicated global following that grew through word of mouth, relentless touring, and an unwavering commitment to musicianship. Time ultimately changed the conversation. As the years passed, a new generation of musicians began citing Rush as a major influence. Artists from bands such as Metallica, Dream Theater, Foo Fighters, Primus, and the Smashing Pumpkins praised the trio's songwriting, technical brilliance, and fearless creativity. The very qualities critics once mocked became the reasons so many musicians admired them. Rush didn't win by proving the critics wrong overnight. They won by outlasting them. In the end, Rush didn't refuse the rules because they wanted to be rebels. They refused them because they believed great music had to be honest. When the record label wanted shorter songs, they created 2012. When trends shifted, they evolved without abandoning their identity. When critics dismissed them, they kept touring until the fans spoke louder than any review. And when fame offered the temptation to become larger-than-life celebrities, Geddy Lee, Lifeson, and Neil Peart remained remarkably grounded, letting their work define them instead of the headlines. Their final concert, on August 1, 2015, in Los Angeles, marked the end of the R40 Live tour. Few knew it would become Rush's last performance together. Then, on January 7, 2020, Neil Peart passed away after a private battle with glioblastoma, bringing an emotional close to one of rock's most extraordinary chapters. Today, Rush's influence stretches far beyond progressive rock. Their songs are studied by musicians, celebrated by fans across generations, and honored by artists who continue to cite them as one of the greatest power trios ever assembled. Maybe that's the biggest lesson Rush ever taught us. Sometimes, following the rules earns you approval. But having the courage to ignore them, while staying true to your craft, can earn you something far more lasting: respect, loyalty, and a legacy that outlives every trend. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments, what do you think was the boldest rule Rush ever broke? And if you want more untold stories from Rush's incredible journey, stick around, because there's always another chapter waiting to be discovered.